Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Skull Island. Today on the spot, we're getting into the second film in the MonsterVerse. With this film is where things get a bit more interesting than just Godzilla. The MonsterVerse was only expanding. You see, in the early stages of Godzilla 2014's development, it was just really known that it would be Legendary's Godzilla trilogy. This was due to the agreement between Toho and Legendary. By September of 2014, Legendary brought forth a teaser for a brand new King Kong origin film, which kinda drew questions about the future between Godzilla and Kong. In due time, I'll dig into Godzilla and King Kong more. However, though, for this review, I want to keep this solely on the origins of the movie Skull Island. The amazing thing is the links to this film actually go back pretty far, with the possibility of a Peter Jackson King Kong sequel. And who was handpicked as the director? Well, that would have been Adam Wingard. Unfortunately for Wingard, he would not get the green light. Not yet. However, in due time, his name will be attached to another project that will be, in fact, even bigger. Ultimately, this planned King Kong sequel would be abandoned and become the start of a brand new King Kong reboot. But the thing I applaud about this King Kong film is it takes a brand new direction and spin in contrast to most reboots. In turn, this does abandon classic tropes such as King Kong scaling a giant building, Beauty killing the Beast. It should also be noted that between Godzilla and King Kong, when they get reboots, there's a huge difference. Generally, the idea is reboot the Godzilla series, but link it back to the original one. King Kong, though, not so much. King Kong films generally retell the same story, but with a few variants in the tale. Maybe there's a few slight changes in the story, like looking for oil deposits, or shooting a movie on a mysterious island. But no matter the variant in a human's intentions, it all leads to the same ending. To link Godzilla to Kong, we'd need to revamp the story. This film, while it isn't set in a modern 2017, it opts to take place in 1973 during the Vietnam War. Another fraction of the plot is also attached to 1944 during World War II. For one, I applaud the setting and timeline of this movie for multiple reasons. Reason number one is because it takes a look at a different time of conflict in history. And maybe this film doesn't explore King Kong in the city, but it's littered with so much character. In fact, music plays a pretty good role in this film. Fun fact, outside my science fiction obsession, music is a big part of my life. Music that predates my birth is not exempt. The Hollies, Black Sabbath, Creedence Clearwater Revival, and David Bowie are prime examples of music you will see playing on various record players. Just a prime example of what to expect in this film, and I'd say a good 85% of this movie actually take place on Skull Island, causing it to live up to its title. So don't expect to see the usual formula of city to Skull Island, back to the city, and roll credits. The next reason of why I applaud this movie is because it has an easy explanation of how Godzilla and Kong will actually fight. Well, granted, I will say this still didn't get through people's heads. But it's simple. Kong is still growing at the time in this movie's events, which give him nearly 40 years, and he'll measure up to Godzilla a bit more by then. So we open this film in 1944 with two fighter pilots crashing on an island that they don't exactly know where they even are. Despite crashing, animosity in war doesn't stop these two from attempting to kill each other, as our American and Japanese pilot fight to the death. Unfortunately for these two, all they do is disrupt a young King Kong from his sleeping slumber, causing these two to realize maybe now isn't the time to fight. Fast forward 29 years later and we get the bulk of the story. We meet Bill Randa, leading Monarch in the search of primitive kaiju on Skull Island, which is completely uncharted and unknown. Now this is where the storyline in this film really picks up, because you see Bill, he knows there's something out there from past experiences. In fact, he's the sole survivor of an attack from a giant unknown creature. A lot of this character is completely in line with Ford Brody's father, Joe, who would have a similar experience some 26 years later in 1999, searching for proof until his demise in 2014. We assemble a squad who have little knowledge of the danger that lies within the walls of Skull Island. And this is where we get the bulk of the action and intensity in this film. Now let me tell you something. Kong's debut in this film on screen is absolutely marvelous. Every time I watch this movie, I'm just completely blown away by the gorgeous cinematography and can't help but applaud the atmosphere this movie provides. Skull Island may be beautiful, but it's a no man's land still.
Odd. The most dangerous places are always the most beautiful.
Now let's return to King Kong and his debut. You see, Kong isn't exactly too keen on people dropping explosives and making noise. Really, this whole scene is Kong's way of saying, keep it the f down. Because the humans know not what they may stir up, even if their intent is for the benefit of proving the Hollow Earth theory might have some merit. And keep the Hollow Earth theory in mind, due to the fact this movie begins building a new platform of what will play a huge role in the story of the MonsterVerse and bind together what we know about the kaiju and their origins. From here, this movie looks pretty straightforward, but that's not exactly the case. In fact, it's far more complex, especially with everybody displaced, because we're dealing with two sides of perspective. On one side, seeking revenge towards what one believes to be a soulless monster inhabiting a damned forsaken island. The flip side, others that simply wish to get off the island alive. They'd rather pick their battles. Unfortunately, for the others, they will blindly follow Preston even though they know his plans are a suicide mission. Now I should point out one big drawback of this film for me is the fact that it doesn't keep me on the edge, especially when this island doesn't feel like complete danger or hell, like the Peter Jackson film. In no sense do I feel like I'm on the edge of my seat every time they encounter a new creature on the island. In fact, most of this movie places the emphasis on the skull crawlers, loosely based on a two-legged lizard in the original King Kong. Really, this is our kaiju antagonist, next to Preston, which is a secondary antagonist. But it's important to also note how Preston and the skull crawlers indirectly link. So let me explain it this way. Preston wishes to kill Kong, the last of a species who has been killed off by the skull crawlers. Should he succeed, natural order will be disrupted. Then you have the natives who look up to King Kong as a god. He is their protector. Not only to them, but Kong is also sympathetic towards the peaceful life on the island. You see, if King Kong dies, the natives will be wiped out by the skull crawlers, and there goes everything. At that point, there's nothing to control the skull crawlers. Sound familiar? Yes, it kind of mirrors Godzilla and the Mutos. So I want to go ahead and touch on my thoughts on the natives in this film. This film, they're portrayed as peaceful. I wasn't exactly a fan of this idea. Why? It's due to the fact that to me it just takes away from the danger in this film. That aside, it's not a huge complaint to me, but it does go ahead and bind together our lone survivor from World War II. This is where our survivor, Hank Marlowe, relays the story of what's going on and what we're facing and who Kong exactly is to the natives. So Hank's character in this film is MVP caliber, and I really love the dialogue when he's asking about what is even happening back home in his home country. Keep in mind he's been separated from the world for nearly 30 years. He has zero concept of current events. Seeing this character every time I watch this movie makes me think about imagine being that detached from your friends, family, and all loved ones, who have all just assumed you're dead and gone. Within a flip of a switch, the little things we enjoy, like a hot dog and a beer, watching TV, all gone. The things we do to kill time in our spare time we think nothing of because it's always in arm's reach. On the bright side of this film, while the violence is toned down compared to Peter Jackson's film, the movie does a wonderful job reminding us during a time of hope, danger is still out there. In this film, if anything, it's much easier for audiences to digest compared to Peter Jackson's film, which this movie only clocks at about 2 hours, just shy of it. So it's far less straining, packing it with new lore into the MonsterVerse. Paying tribute to the iconic King Kong vs. Godzilla, another area this film succeeds at is the final battle, Kong versus the big one. It's so much more bearable compared to Godzilla 2014, which had way too much darkness going on and cutaways. Here, none of that. And I'm gonna be brutally honest, this film as a Godzilla mark made me incredibly salty due to the fact that I kinda wish Godzilla 2014's battle sequences had been handled like Skull Island's. It's just an all-around visually appealing film, and dare I say, this is the best MonsterVerse movie by far. Perfect storytelling, casting Tom Hiddleston, Samuel Jackson, John Goodman, Brie Larson. Shot brilliantly with a rugged tone. I don't know, is it time? Is it time for me to take these nostalgia glasses off and just admit that Skull Island is better than Peter Jackson's Kong? It's really hard to pick. Personally, I prefer the 2005 film, but I know, I won't act like I speak for everyone. Truth is, Skull Island by default opens the door so much wider. The key point of this film, and aim, is a new direction in the MonsterVerse. At this point, no longer is it just the story of Godzilla. It's the story of kaiju on Earth, predating human existence. And this film does have a post-credits sequence, which is very meaningful, knowing that Godzilla isn't alone. In our next film, we're going to reassemble Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Rodan. For the first time in 15 years, Rodan and Mothra are back. King Ghidorah, it's been 18 years since we've had a pure King Ghidorah appear on screen. So stay tuned for the next chapter in the MonsterVerse because you're not going to want to miss it. This has been Skull Island as I see it. Like, subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section telling me what you think of this film. Have a good one.